The yard is not a backdrop. I choreograph weight, and most nights that's enough of a biography. My name is Colin. I'm a yard master on the midnight trick at East Harbor, a freight yard you've never noticed except when the grade crossing holds you long enough to practice patience. If you've never stood in a tower staring at a maze of steel that believes in momentum more than you do, imagine a chessboard that moves itself and punishes metaphors. My job is to make sure 100 pieces of deliberate metal don't argue with one another or the clock. At home, there's Evan, a high school history teacher who can talk a sophomore out of a conspiracy and a grown man out of a tantrum. We keep our household rules on an index card taped to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a caboose. They're ordinary because survival is. No afters without names and minutes. Compliments open no doors. Hands belong to what they're holding. Last winter we added a fourth after a videographer on a tour reached for my jaw to help the shot. It reads, "The yard is not a backdrop." Our tower sits in the crook of the ladder tracks, 4 flights up a staircase that keeps its grudges. The room is mostly glass and radios, 2 dispatch screens, a mimic board with LEDs that confess, a bank of handhelds, a coffee maker with union seniority. The yard itself spreads east like a conversation you didn't mean to start. Receiving yard where inbound trains get undressed into cuts. Classification yard where we teach those cuts the alphabet. Departure tracks where we tape new names on old freight and say go. People think railroads are romance and calendars. The truth is humbler, verbs than habits. Line, lock, shove, pin, pull, stretch. Check your footing, check again. You learn to speak tonnage without raising your voice. You learn that weather isn't mood, it's a manager with tenure. You learn that a good night is one where the only stories are the ones you refuse to tell. When the port turned 100, someone above my pay grade invented open rails, public tour of the Heritage Roundhouse, a brass band on the platform at Central, a kids' scavenger hunt for signals you should not touch. And because we all apparently live inside a camera now, a 10-minute live stream from our tower to let donors feel the choreography. If you've ever watched a hump job stretch a cut over the crest and into 6 different lives, you know there is choreography here, but it's boring on purpose. Boring keeps people employed and attached to their favorite limbs. I asked that the stream be done from the tower's back rail with a wide lens and a grown-up. I asked that the badge say observer, not media, because nouns become fences when they admit their size. I asked that the stream not happen during crew changes, cold starts, or fog. The email answered with a calendar block and a gif of a cartoon locomotive with eyelashes. Evan kissed my forehead over the sink and said, "We can add a line if we need to." He had papers to grade and a morning that wanted him, but he tapped the index card anyway. "Promise me," he said. "Promise me," I said back. The week before the event, I walked the yard with a roll of yellow tape and wrote down more verbs than thoughts. Tape line at the bottom of the tower stairs. Tape square around the hand throw switch outside the lead. Tape X by the derail that keeps stupid from becoming news. On the console, I stuck a post-it. No REFLECTIONS, because camera lenses love stealing more than they love learning. I checked the switch heaters. I listened for a turnout motor with opinions. I asked the hump set to forgive me in advance. The crew arrived at 21:00 in soft shoes and intentions. Their frontman was a host named Drew whose voice sounds like a platform announcement imagined by a marketing department. Cheerful, confident, warm to a fault. His producer, Tamsin, had practical hair and a clipboard covered with rectangles that meant no. 10 minutes inside the heartbeat, Drew said, fingers making a frame that couldn't hold the yard if it tried. Let people feel the magic. Magic has the night off, I said. Operations is covering. Tamsin laughed with relief you could hear. We rehearsed once with the radios on scan and the yard pretending to be polite. I pointed at the ladder and the switches that line it like spinal decisions. I pointed at the bowl where cars wait to be told who they belong to. I taught the two words that run my nights, where and when. I said the line I keep for places designed for eyes, not lenses. Transparency is where the camera stands, not what it steals. Tamsin wrote it down. Drew said, love that, the way people collect slogans for later. The first stream slotted between crew change and the start of the midnight hump. The chat, I hear afterward, made hearts like we were currying something. I explained why a good yardmaster sounds bored, because interesting is expensive. I explained cut lists and why 3 numbers can save a mile of walking. I did not explain that my heart rate doesn't get to be special. The room has enough to do. Then Drew did what cameras ask men to do, rearrange each other. You've got a little glare, he murmured, thumb already lifting toward my cheek, toward a collar the lens hated. My body moved 1 centimeter, which is the distance between a rule and an accident. The yard is not a backdrop, I said. Hands belong to what they're holding. His hand learned his pocket. Tamsin adjusted the shot to the mimic board where a lineup light blinked like a patient metronome. On the radio, the hump foreman called for a pin cut. The bowlman answered with a stretch the way trust answers bread. The night remembered its job. We ended the stream with a wide of the ladder, no names close enough for your cousin to misuse, and a voice thanking donors for liking boring. The second stream was scheduled for 23:30, unfortunately also known as when fog practices Latin. I asked development to pick any other slice of eternity. They brought cupcakes. I accepted the cupcakes and wrote an extra note to myself. Listen twice. 10 minutes before go time, a bank of fog rolled off the river like a bad idea with a plan. The bowl vanished into a polite absence. I started the switch heaters I'd begged maintenance not to defer. I told the hump crew to cut slower and hold for the call. I told a road train to take the long way around the yard because we were going to be clumsy for a while. Drew asked if we could pivot to this breaking moment, and I said we could pivot to the duty and the view. We could not pivot to spectacle like it was ever a good idea. He nodded like a person who wanted to be believed. We went live. I talked about sound becoming sight, how couplers talk in weather, how steel tells the truth to boots. I said the word tonnage with the respect it deserves. I did not say my chest had switched to a smaller gear. The yard had enough to carry. Midstream, 2 local creators, men with gimbals and confidence rented by the hour, ducked under the yellow tape at the tower stairs to get the angle. One reached toward the hand throw on the lead as if touching would translate. The distance between me and a phone became the distance between someone else and regret. No, I said, not loud, the tone that trains muscle memory. Back behind the line. Tamsin cut the feed like mercy. The men did the good thing slow. They moved and tried to look like they'd meant to. Afterward, Alvarez from the car department, whose laugh sounds like a socket seating, leaned in the doorway with a grin like a coupler found the right mouth. The smallest moves, he said. The ones nobody claps for. Maintenance, I said, not heroics. 2 days later, the port convened what it called an alignment conversation, which is administrative for you and communications have to share a room. Around the table, me, Tamsin, a deputy director with a tie shaped like ambition, Drew, who had learned the posture of listening, and 2 creators who smelled faintly of brand deals. The deputy said harmonize 3 times like it could pay invoices. Drew opened his hands. I confused frame and lock, he said. I wanted intimacy and reached for control. Thanks for the lesson. Tamsin proposed printing a line on every badge next time. The yard is not a backdrop. I asked for its sister, Hands belong to what they're holding. We wrote 3 policies that felt older than our pens. First, a 1-meter tape line at every tower stair and switch stand during events, stenciled on concrete and printed on maps. Second, camera position charts that show where cameras may be, not just where they may not. Third, a practice of having crews say out loud on mic what they will not shoot before they roll. Make the no part of the script, Tamsin said. Make the script smaller, I said. The creators nodded like people who know rent. Depends on being seen nodding at the right time. A week later, a kid showed up at the base of the tower with a folded page and the respectful anxiety of someone trying to become himself. "Can I read something?" he asked. Not on camera. He read 3 sentences about the first time his dad lifted him to the window at the old depot to watch a locomotive breathe, and how the glass had felt like permission without a door. He left the paper on the console and ran before his ears could burn. I keep it under the cut lists now. It wrinkles when the pencil moves, which feels like the right kind of maintenance. You want a moral. I'm a yard master, I have checklists. I can give you this. Sweep the stairs, test the heater, listen twice in fog, say no before you need to. Don't let a camera teach the yard what it is. The older I get, the more I think boundaries are kindness that can lift heavy. A well-timed no saves cities from needing very brave people later. Back home after the debrief, Evan added a 5th line to the card because his classroom had a crop of kids who thought extra credit could replace consent. 5. Thank the person who keeps the door before the person who brings the light. He wrote it small, the way you write truths you plan to say often. We ate cold noodles on the couch and tried to tell each other the boring parts of our days until they became the important parts. Sometimes I replay the inch my face moved, not out of triumph, but because it belongs in the drawer labeled proof that quiet prevents theater. Sometimes I think about the night a switch failed and the bowlman caught it with a shout and a glove and a rope burn, and no one outside the yard learned they'd been loved. Sometimes I think about the fog that does math where you can't see, and how steel forgives you if your apology contains the words hold and again. I haven't told you about the time a tourist strolled down the ballast to take selfies and Alvarez got to say, "Lines are a kind of love." I haven't told you about the day the local jerked to life after a dead battery, and the engineer cried like a superstition relieved. I haven't told you about the bowlman who sings the alphabet to the cuts, because sometimes you have to believe letters are more than symbols. Those live next to the spare radio, the Band-Aid tin, and the peppermint I keep for operators who forget they're human. If you ever stand at the chain link on a night when the yard glows like patience, you might see a ladder of light step away and return as if the ground were breathing. You might hear a coupler sigh. You might feel bigger or smaller than your favorite memory. That's fine. Keep your hands on what they're holding. If a camera twitches and you feel the itch to fix my collar for the shot, watch for the small motion, the small smile, and remember the line we printed on badges and taped to the stair and wrote on our fridge. The yard is not a backdrop. The trains will still be trains in the morning. That is the only applause I need.